Hello to you and welcome to this video. Today, we are tackling a classic, does something everyone knows when it comes to backup and data protection. It's the 3-2-1-1-0 rule. This rule is the foundation. If you want your data protection strategy to be solid, you have every reason to comply with this 3-2-1-1-0 rule. But let's be honest, between us, the two ones in the middle are often a hassle. An offsite copy, an offline copy, or an immutable copy, and if possible, encrypted. All of that isn't easy. You know what? Veeam has a solution that will make all of this easier for you. It's called Veeam Vault. I'm going to show you all of this in detail. Let's get started. What exactly does this 3-2-1-1-0 rule say in detail? It says that to have a resilient data protection strategy, it is recommended to have at least 3 copies of your data, to use at least 2 different types of media to store those copies, to have 1 copy stored. Externally, offsite, to have at least 1 copy that is disconnected on a disconnected medium, offline or air gap type, and to make sure that this copy is also, if possible, immutable to prevent it from being deleted, for example. And finally, the 0 in the rule is simply there to remind us of the importance of performing restore tests to ensure that these backups contain no errors, that the backups are in good condition, and that restorability is guaranteed. So 0 errors. Okay? In reality, in practice, generally, the difficulties are not with the 3 or the 2, but the difficulties, as we know, are almost always concentrated on the 2 ones in the middle. We know that this is where things get stuck because not all companies have a secondary site. Not all companies have the ability to offsite a backup copy to a disaster recovery site. You need to have this disaster recovery site, and then you also need storage at this disaster recovery site, which is not the case for all companies. In any case, this adds extra complexity and an additional challenge. First of all, next, to have the offline copy, the backup to tape is often used, the TEPs, because it's a medium that by definition is physically disconnected from the IT system. However, tape backup presents other challenges and limitations, and it can add complexity, make management more cumbersome, and complicate the backup strategy if it is poorly managed or not implemented optimally. Immutability is also something that needs to be configured. So it requires skills depending on the level or the place where you want to enable immutability. You need to know about it, you need to enable it, you need to remember to enable it. And so the fact that this is a manual operation, it presents a certain risk, a risk of forgetting or a risk of misconfiguring immutability, which can ultimately or weaken the security of the backups. So the difficulties often focus on the 2 in the middle, as I mentioned earlier in the introduction. The real challenge is having a secure offsite copy, an offsite copy that is truly secure. That is the difficulty. So the solution, one of the solutions at least, is the one Veeam offers to simplify all this, to make implementing the 3-2-1-0 rule easier and to really address those 2 points in the middle. Veeam offers a solution, at least a technological one, called Veeam Vault. So Veeam Vault will simplify all of this. It will at least allow you to have a copy as shown here. Veeam Vault is a solution. It's cloud storage as a service provided and offered by Veeam. And so this makes it easy and very straightforward to have an offsite externalized copy since it is hosted in the cloud. It allows you to have an all air gap copy. It enables you to have an immutable copy because in this scenario, we use the immutability mechanisms available in Azure on Azure Object Storage and a backup copy that is also encrypted. And all of this comes with a lot of simplicity in the configuration. You will see this in a moment during the demonstration. Okay, so this is the Veeam Vault solution. In any case, Veeam's offering is cloud storage hosted on Azure infrastructure, a storage solution managed by Veeam, secured in advance by Veeam, pre-configured by Veeam to simplify the process of having an externalized and secure copy. Pre-configured, pre-secured, there is virtually nothing to set up on the Veeam side to have the certainty and guarantee that the backup copy is externalized in the cloud, but also that it is secured thanks to immutability, and that the data, the backups, are encrypted to ensure complete integrity. There are different ways to use Vault. In this diagram, you have 3 different methods. These are examples of how mere Vault can be used. The first use case is direct backup to a Vault. This doesn't necessarily fully comply with the 3210 rule, which requires at least 2 backup copies, but in some cases, for certain uses, you might need to perform direct backups like this to the cloud. So it's entirely possible to implement this and backup directly to a Vault in the cloud. Another option is to create a backup. So you have a first backup here, locally on the main site, on disk, for example, and then perform what is called a backup copy to the Veeam Vault. The backup copy is another job that can be created in addition to the backup in Veeam Backup and Replication to obtain this secondary copy. And the third scenario, which is really the one we recommend, the one I personally prefer, at least in terms of simplicity and efficiency, is this scenario described here, where we integrate the Vault into a somewhat special repository called the Scale-Out Backup repository. The Scale-Out Backup repository should be seen as a logical repository. It's a logical entity. And inside it, you will have several tiers, so multiple tiers: performance tier, capacity tier, and even archive tier. So the idea is to present this logical repository to Veeam so that backups are all directed there and stored there. And then within the SOBR, you define a rule or rules that will move or copy the data to the different tiers, depending on what you want to implement in terms of resilience. The idea, the principle here is to create a scale-out backup repository. In the scale-out backup repository, you integrate the normal local disk repository into the performance tier, which will host the local copy. And then you integrate the Vault into the scale-out backup repository. And at the SOBR level, you configure a rule called copy or copy and move, which will automatically copy the data to the Vault or automatically move the data to the Vault so that you always have both backup copies in a very simple way. So here, what's really interesting about this setup is that there's only one job to configure the backup job. You create the SOBR. You want increase, set the rule, and then the data is automatically copied from the main primary repository here to the object storage Vault. And at that point, you are fully compliant with the 3-2-1 rule. Just a quick note about the Vault before moving on to the demo. Currently at Veeam, there are 2 editions of the Vault, a Foundation edition and an Advanced edition. I won't go into too much detail in this video so as not to make the demo longer, but what we recommend, there is a difference in pricing or in terms of costs. The public price is $14 for the Foundation edition and $28, I believe, for the Advanced edition. The main difference, or at least in terms of use cases, is that we recommend choosing the Foundation edition for a scenario like this and opting for the Advanced edition when sending data directly to a repository. There are also other differences regarding what we call fair use or during restoration. This concerns the data flows, in other words, how much data you can restore without incurring additional costs. In the Advanced edition, everything is included, but with limits. You can restore 100% of the stored, and backed up data. In the Foundation edition, there is a cap, a limitation of like 20% when it comes to restoration. There is another small difference regarding durability, because with the Foundation edition, it's mostly LRS, local redundancy, system, whereas with the advanced edition, it's more ZRS, which means much more attractive redundancy. LRS and ZRS are concepts of availability, of high availability, offered on the Azure side. I'll close that parenthesis. If you need more details about these offerings, you can visit our website. But beyond these differences, there aren't any others. Both editions always provide simplicity, allow you to have an automatically immutable copy, and also an encrypted copy. So in terms of security and protection, both versions work and ensure this function. Let's move on to the demo. When you subscribe to the Vault offering with Veeam, you can do so directly through Uik, the marketplace, or go through a partner, Ukitab, to acquire the solution. Just as you would go through a partner, Katom, to purchase licenses, you can do exactly the same thing, Fako, for the Vault. Once you have subscribed and purchased a certain amount of Vault capacity, you will receive credentials, and you can use your Veeam credentials. In fact, you have the choice between using Veeam credentials or Azure credentials. Whether you use your Veeam or Azure credentials, in any case, you will arrive at this Veeam Data Cloud Vault portal, which allows you to be in a SOBR view within this dashboard, the amount of terabytes you have. So you have made a purchase from Veeam. Here I have a 1 terabyte Vault that I'm using. Here I have a dashboard that gives me an overview of my usage. We have the storage used here and here, the purchase capacity. This way, you can monitor the usage of the storage vault. Storage vault. If you click here on Storage Vault, you will see the list of vaults that have been created. You can create multiple vaults. So, for each subscription, you can create several vaults to meet organizational needs. For example, if you have subsidiaries, several subsidiaries within your company, you can, for instance, create 1 vault per subsidiary. If you have multiple entities, multiple departments, or several backup servers, you can create 1 vault per backup server. But it is entirely possible to work with a single vault and have multiple backups converge into the same vault by creating within the backups a folder or directory to store the object bucket. In the Storage Vault section, you can see here the list of different vaults that I have created. Creating one is very simple. Just to show you in the wizard, there are 4 fields to fill out. The name of the vault, the edition, you see? I have a foundation edition, so obviously I can't just change it on the fly like that. And the subscription, I have my subscription. You can have multiple subscriptions. You have the list in the drop-down menu. And the last step, you choose the backup location, so the country where you want to store your data. With the foundation edition, you can choose the country. With the advanced version, you can choose the Azure region. So it's country and Azure region, right? This is really in the Azure sense. Here you have the list of Azure data centers and the countries where the Azure data centers are located. And with an advanced edition, you'll have the option to select the available Azure regions. Okay, I'm not going to confirm it, otherwise it will create another one for me. So I'm exiting from here. That was just to show you how to create a vault. So you can see that the interface is very streamlined. There's nothing to do. You create a vault, you give the vault a name, you choose the country or region depending on the vault edition you're using, and right away you have a vault that's created. When the vault is created, there is information that will be useful later for connecting to this vault from your Veeam backup and replication console so that Veeam can back up to this vault. So it's this information here, the storage account name, and a key here that you retrieve, which you will save and integrate into Veeam backup and replication. Okay. All right. Let's take a look on the Veeam backup and replication side. Here in backup infrastructure, I have a vault here that is created. Well, what I suggest we do, what I'm going to demonstrate in this demo, which is the demo scenario I've chosen, is to implement this. We're going to try to configure this together, starting from adding the vault in Veeam backup and replication, creating the scale-out backup repository, setting up copy and move, and then the backup. We're really going to do all of this configuration in the demo. All right, let's get started. So we'll begin by creating the vault. So Veeam Data Cloud Vault. I'm going to call it Vault SOBR copy. On guide to clearly distinguish it. For example, from the backup copy vault, the credentials, next. Here, then, so we'll select the storage account. We'll look for that, a SOBR vault, this one. There, paste. I went a bit too fast earlier. Here, paste it. Here. Vault, get over. Okay. Next. And so now Veeam is going to connect to this vault. So here we are. We have a container called immutable, VBR. We're going to create a folder. Okay. And you can see something here, which is that the immutability activation is done here in Veeam backup and replication. You can see that in fact the box is checked and it's grayed out. It's impossible to uncheck this box, so immutability can't be disabled, and it's impossible to forget to activate it for any reason. So with immutability enabled, I'm going to set it much lower because I'm working in a lab and I don't want to keep the backups for too long. So let's say I'll set it to 7 days, for example, and then I click next. Okay. Now we're here. We click apply. We apply all of this and we finalize the creation of this repository, Vault. All right. So now it's done. We click next, then finish. And now we have our Vault here on the SOBR copy Vault, which has been created. So the next step is to create the scale out backup repository. So we're going to create the scale out backup repository here. We'll call it SOBR for Vault. Indicate that we're going to integrate the Vault into this scale out backup repository. Next, we'll go to, as you can see here, the performance tier. We're going to add the performance tier. The performance tier is my local repository on the site, which I'm going to integrate in this way. Here we come to the policy data locality performance. These are properties or sites of the scale out backup repository. We'll leave it on data. Data locality simply means that we don't want to separate, for example, a full backup and its incrementals. Elements from the same chain will be stored on the same tier and not separated. Next, I'm in the capacity tier. I'm saying I want to extend my scale out backup repository to a capacity tier. Here I'm going to select my Vault SOBR copy, which I created. Okay, and I'm going to make a copy. You have the choice between copying, or if you only do the move, you won't be fully compliant with the 3-2-1 rule, because the move actually transfers dead chains, inactive chains to the performance tier. So that helps reduce the cost of local storage. But you don't have two backup copies. That is, for each retention point, you don't have two copies, Be very careful about that. If you really want to, if you want to be sure that for each backup or each retention point, you have two copies, you must use copy only. This will create a kind of mirroring, a perfect mirror between the retention points in the performance tier and those in the capacity tier. By using move, it allows you to optimize things a bit and have the short-term retention both on the performance tier and on the capacity tier. So we have two copies of the short-term retention, so to speak. However, everything that is long-term retention, so inactive, backup chains or GFS, for example, is stored only on object storage. So it's an optimization that allows what? It allows you to optimize the space used on the performance tier. So I'm going to do a simple copy. Copy, I want to mirror. I want to have exactly the same number of retention points on both sides. So I'm setting up this configuration. Okay. I click next. And as you can see, I intentionally left the box checked. You see what it tells me? Backup encryption must be enabled when using Veeam Data Cloud Vault. I am required to enable encryption. I can't go any further without enabling encryption. So what am I going to do? I'm going to enable encryption and use an existing password that I created a few days ago. And that will allow me to proceed next archive tier. I don't intend to have an archive tier, so we confirm. And we finalize everything. So where are we at? Where are we at? Well, we're here. We just did that. We just created all of this. So we created the vault. Then we created the scale-out backup repository on Tokyo. And after that, we integrated into the scale-out backup repository, the local repository here in the performance tier, and this vault in the capacity tier of our scale-out backup repository. Now, what we're going to do is configure our backup job here to send backups to this scale-out backup repository. All right, let's go. So I'm coming back here. We select backup. All right, virtual machine. We're going to call it backup to SOBR Vault. Okay, next, we're going to choose a few virtual machines here. So we'll select a few virtual machines here. Here we'll take the 3 small VMs that are there. Next, we're going to choose the SOBR Vault repository. Here, for the retention policy, we'll leave it at 7 and click next. We'll leave all of this as it is. We'll apply and then we'll run this job. There we go. And so the backup job has just finished. The backup job has just finished. And here you can see there's a job that's still running. It's called backup to SOBR offload. This is the immediate copy job. We just created the backups in the performance tier, and so automatically Veeam is copying, mirroring, replicating these backups, these newly created backup retention points to the capacity tier, and therefore to our vault storage in the cloud. The operation is complete. The copy or offload operation, to use Veeam's terminology, is finished. And what we see here is interesting. We can see a capacity tier appearing here. On the disk, we have our backup, a copy of the backups of these 3 virtual machines, which is on the repository, the local repository. And here in the capacity tier, we have the backup copies that are indeed here in the SOBR Vault. So we have 2 backup copies, one local, and one in the top cloud vault. There you go. It's finished. That was Veeam Vault. If you found this demo interesting, if you learned something, please don't hesitate to let me know in the comments. And also subscribe to the channel, okay? It's the only thing that motivates and encourages me to keep creating content. So that was Veeam Vault. Now you have no more excuses. If you want your data strategy to be solid, follow the 3, 2, 1, 0 rule. And if you don't want any hustle, try Veeam Vault. All right, see you. Ciao.